noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking. A few months ago I was talking to a friend of mine, his name is Johannes and he's Greek, and we were talking about ancient Rome and ancient Greece because we're both really into these ancient civilizations, each other's ancient civilizations. And a question came up which I found particularly interesting, and it was the question, would it be possible to wear male armor, so in the case of Roman armor, Lorica Hamata, underneath a Lorica Segmentata? Now this is an interesting question, and in this video I am going to answer this question. I'm going to discuss this topic. Would it be possible? Would it make sense? And was it actually historically done? Okay, to begin with, I'd like to answer the first question. Would it be possible to do it? Yes, it would. You can, if you want, wear Lorica Hamata or male armor underneath a full Lorica Segmentata. The whole concept of multi-layered armor has been around forever. I mean, even if you think about an actual gambeson, it's a series of layers of either linen, cloth. So at the end of the day, it's still multi-layered protection. So yes, it could be done. And if you think about, for example, the late Middle Ages, when you have the development of full plate armor, most knights were still wearing male armor underneath full plate. Sometimes in some countries in Europe, knights switched to a more comfortable arming doublet where male was present only in the important parts, so the gaps that weren't protected by plate armor. But in other countries, for example in Italy, what we did was to what knights did was to wear skirts of mail, for example, and but other knights still wore the full male shirt underneath plate armor. So definitely, if they did that, it means that the double layer protection is very important. And if you think about it, it's good to have something to back up plate. Although I have to say that piercing plate is extremely difficult, particularly if it's hardened plate. But coming back to the actual topic, so it could make sense, but not for the Romans. So did they actually do it historically? No, although they did have multi-layered armor, and we will get to this in a moment. But as far as we know, talking about Lorica Segmentata, and I've got lots of videos about Roman armor, but if we talk about Lorica Segmentata, it's a kind of armor that was used from 9 BC to the 3rd century. So we're talking about an armor that was mostly used during imperial times. Also, very important to this is to note that when Lorica Segmentata started to be issued to the army, to the infantry, we are talking about already the kind of army, standard army and professional soldiers after the Marian reforms, because Marian reforms happen in 107, they begin in 107. So Marian reforms, imperial army, when we talk about Lorica Segmentata, for what we know. Before that and after that, the only kind of armor used was Lorica Hamata, together with Lorica Squamata sometimes. And if you're not familiar with the actual Latin names, I'm going to use also the English names. So we're talking about male armor and scale armor. So how common was Lorica Segmentata? Lorica Segmentata, we don't really know. We know that while Lorica Segmentata was in use, Lorica Hamata, the male armor, was also still used by legionaries. In fact, you also have to consider that Roman legions, the legiones, are not always completely uniform in the kind of equipment that the soldiers were using. You can have a Roman legion, you mostly had a Roman legion where you would have both Lorica Segmentata, Lorica Hamata, perhaps someone wearing the Squamata. So you do have this, and even within Lorica Segmentata you've got different versions. You've got, for example, the Corbridge version, which is this one here. You've got Newstead version. It seems like that there was also a version of Lorica Segmentata that instead of having plate shoulder guards, it had scale shoulder guards, but we're not really sure how common that was, because there was only one very badly damaged statue that portrays that in Romania, so we don't know much. But again, it is the statues and iconography that gives us an idea on how this armor was used. If we look at the Trajan column, for example, that is the most popular representation and most famous representation of a Roman army. And what we see there is a distinct difference between auxiliary troops wearing mail armor and legionaries wearing Lorica Segmentata. We don't see any mixture. And when you see soldiers wearing Lorica Segmentata, which have something coming out from underneath it, well, those are called pteroges, and they are part of what was called a Subarmalis. So Subarmalis was the kind of padded garment that would be worn underneath Lorica Segmentata in order to offer padding for the otherwise very heavy burden that you would have on your shoulders during march. So again, Subarmalis is what you wear underneath this. So you would have tunic, Subarmalis, Lorica Segmentata. If you want to know more about Subarmalis, I'm not going to talk about it here, but if you want to know more about Subarmalis, I made a full video about Subarmalis with all documents and stuff, Roman writers talking about it, so you can click here if you want to know more about Roman Subarmalis. Tunic, Subarmalis, Lorica Segmentata. So it's already a multi-layered armor for infantry. It's providing padding, it's providing resistance. And then you've got your scutum, the shield. So again, some historians actually don't really consider the Trajan's column to be an accurate representation of the difference between auxiliary troops and main forces during Marian reforms, the actual heavy infantry, because it might be a very stereotypical vision of that. And there is another column, actually, there is another column where Lorica Segmentata is not present, regardless of the fact that it was issued at that time, and we only have both auxiliary and legionaries wearing either mail or scale, so Hamata or Squamata. So we don't know how much it was used. My understanding of it is that it was widespread, it was used quite a bit, but it was not the only kind of armor that legionary used. But I still kind of believe that it was linked to infantry, because again, Marian reforms means that we don't really have that much focus on cavalry anymore that we had during the Second Punic War because of Scipio Africanus' battle strategies against Hannibal, who was using cavalry very effectively. That is really the zenith of Roman cavalry we see during the Second Punic War. But then after the Marian reforms, the Roman machina goes back to heavy infantry. And this is very important. We'll get to this in a moment for the double layer mail segmentata thing. So cavalry is not the main force anymore. Again, it's back to auxiliary. But when Vegetius, Roman writer, talks about auxiliary troops, he talks about light troops, as opposed to heavy infantry, Roman heavy infantry. Now, that does not mean that all auxiliary troops were light troops, but it does mean that when we talk about light troops, most likely they were not wearing that, because this is the heaviest kind of armor. If we don't talk about gladiators' armor, this is the heaviest kind of armor the Roman legionaries would wear. It is heavier than Hamata. So, how about the two layers thing? The reason why I gave you all this preface and background information is because you have to consider that Roman soldiers are, during this time of segmentata, are heavy infantry. So the legionaries are marching on foot, and having Lorica Hamata underneath Lorica Segmentata, having a Subarmalis and a tunic underneath and all the stuff that they need to carry anyways, so spades and shovels and stuff, it would be just too heavy for infantry units to move with it, to march quickly. And you need to consider that Roman soldiers were expected to march very quickly, to march for a very long time, and it was already quite tough with this stuff, so never mind the rest. And they were also supposed to work in armor. And this is something that most people don't understand. We always imagine Roman soldiers building up fortresses and building up, fences, defenses, felling down trees, building bridges, doing all these things, building roads. The thing is that when they were in enemy territory, they will do all of this wearing armor. So to have an overall understanding of how life of a Roman soldier would be, you begin your day, you wake up, you eat, you wear your armor, you wear it throughout the entire day, whatever you're doing, whether it be combat or just building or anything scouting, and then before going to bed you remove it. This is the kind of experience Roman soldiers had with their armor. And then, of course, at the end of the day, they would just lubricate it, they would put oil it and everything to make sure that it wouldn't rust. Imagine if they had to do all of this and carrying all those things wearing 2 layers of armor. It wasn't done for these reasons. Not because it wouldn't be possible, it would be possible, but it would be impossible because of what a Roman soldier was supposed to do. Also, from a combat point of view, you don't really need 2 layers of protection when you already have the secondary line of defense, your armor, and the first line of defense, or primary line of defense, your scutum, the shield. The shield is the most important line of defense. Your armor, particularly the shoulder plates, but also the rest of the armor, is there, and the helmet is there when you mess up with the shield and your line of defense. If you don't mess up, not a problem. That is just your life insurance, so to speak. So having a secondary layer of protection there, you don't really need it because you already have the scutum. As a matter of fact, if you notice, the strongest part of the armor are the shoulders, because they are the part that most likely would be easier to get if you are if you're not able to parry with your scutum. It's very difficult to get a Roman soldier to hit a Roman soldier here, unless, just like in films, they just open up like this, but of course they didn't. Also, before you mention, if you see some openings here, is because I'm not tying it up to the best of possibilities, because I don't want to put too much pressure on the leather straps while I'm not wearing it, because it's just on display, but I can close up all these gaps if I wanted to. So sometimes in media, like for example the video game Rise, Son of Rome, we do see I think it's the main character, but yeah, I think it's the main character wearing Lorica Segmentata and mail armor. That's because of the looks. Perhaps they got confused with the Middle Ages, but as far as I know, there are no iconographic representations of Roman soldiers wearing both Hamata and Segmentata together. Now, to finish up, I want to give an interesting information. There is one occasion, there's one exception to this rule, not with the Segmentata, but there is a case where we have 2 armors, one on top of the other, and it's with either emperors or generals. Now, when emperors or generals were not wearing the musculata, so the solid plate one, they would be wearing a Lorica Hamata, so the mail armor, on top of which they would put the scales, not the blacksmiths, would put the scales of the Lorica Squamata. So they would have double armor. That was the only case though. It's called plumata, so it changes name, and it's specific to generals and emperors because it would give them the appearance of legendary heroes. First, it would offer them extra protection, but you have to consider the generals and emperors would always be riding a horse. Now, when you ride a horse, and I myself horseback ride, you can see in these pictures is me riding a horse, one of my friend's horses. And when you're sitting, you don't feel the weight of the armor, so you can. So cavalry could have done it, but as far as I know, they didn't. And again, the reason could be that, issuing double armor to a secondary kind of battle unit as opposed to heavy infantry didn't really make much sense from an economical point of view for the Romans. Also, because at the end of the day, their Roman machina was working, so they didn't really need to invest more money on something that was already effective the way it was. So Roman legionaries were not allowed to wear plumata, and the only other kind of soldier that would be riding a horse, apart from the cavalry units, would be centurions. But again, centurions were wearing most of the time Lorica Hamata, and honestly, Lorica Hamata is already a very good form of defense. You don't really need 2 layers of protection if you're working and you're fighting in a tight unit formation with your shield. Also, because you have to consider the Roman Lorica Hamata, so the mail armor, was made of half solid rings and half riveted rings. It was very sturdy, and they had double layer protection on the shoulders again. So it was plenty of protection, and considering you had to wear it again all day long, it probably wasn't the case for them to even think of wearing 2 layers of armor with Segmentata. Okay, I hope that this was an interesting video. If you liked it, please remember thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more content from the Metatron. And remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Valete.